I had a little break. Today's the 14th of July. I'm continuing reading The Last Barrier by Reshad Feilds, a Sufi journey. It was published in 1976. He passed away 2016. And I'm here in chapter 9. He's in Turkey with his teacher Hamid, but he hasn't been very well. Anyhow, we are in chapter 9, and this is the third reading of chapter 9. Finally, one day, when the sun was really warm, I decided to go for a trip up the Bosphorus. To hell with Hamid and all his practices. After all, the trip and the fresh air would do me good. I was still weak and had a nasty cough, so I decided that a trip to the Black Sea would be just what I needed. At last I gathered up a little more courage and telephoned Hamid to tell him what I planned to do. He did not react to my call or to the news of my illness. "It's such a nice day, Hamid," I said, that I thought I would take a little trip up the Bosphorus to get some fresh air. "What a good idea," he replied. "I do hope you have a nice day." It was all right. For the first time in my several weeks at the pension, I felt happy and elated. I walked down to the quay where the boats come in, took the first one heading up the Bosphorus, and spent a perfect day, stopping off at little towns along the way, taking the ferry from one to another. I did not return to the pension until after dark. I had been back scarcely 10 minutes when the owner knocked on my door to let me know that I had a telephone call. It was Hamid. His voice was cold and distant on the other end. "While you were away, someone came to see you. It was a pity that the person could not wait, and so has gone away again." I heard the click of the telephone on the other end. My room was lonelier than ever before. All my good spirits had been replaced by the old despair. What could it mean that someone had come to see me? I did not know anyone in Istanbul except for the Sheikh, and surely it would not have been him. Hamid had sounded as though I had failed a test. Yet instead of yelling at me or ordering me to go home, he had just left me dangling once more. That night I ordered wine to be brought to my room. I drank the whole bottle, and when I finally fell asleep, it was with a resolution to leave for England the next morning. By morning my mood was somewhat better, and I decided to make one last attempt to fulfill whatever it was that I had been sent to the pension to achieve. The test had to do with patience, I was sure, but I also felt there was more to it than that. When another week had dragged past in tedium, I decided to go up the Bosphorus for a second time. Again I called Hamid, and again he said that he thought the trip a fine idea, as I was still not quite recovered from the flu. Again I thought that things would be all right. And again, when I returned that night, Hamid telephoned me. "While you were away, they came," he said. The next morning I packed my bags, telephoned the airport, and booked a flight to England for the following day. I wished that I didn't have to see Hamid again, even to say goodbye, but I knew that I must. When I knocked at Hamid's door, it was opened by an older woman who turned out to be his cousin. "Come in," she said. "We've been expecting you. Lunch will be ready soon. You will stay?" She took me into the living room, gave me a glass of sherry, and in a little while Hamid came in. "There you are," he said, embracing me warmly. "Goodness, but you are that. You are thin. But then this flu does take so much out of one. And I suppose the doctor will have given you penicillin, which only makes things worse. Still, you're quite recovered now?" Lunch was brought in, and we dined as though everything were perfectly normal. No mention was made of the pension. Hamid and his cousin talked about the world crisis and Turkish and Greek politics, and the sort of chit-chat that one might expect at a casual luncheon. When the coffee was brought, however, Hamid's cousin turned to me and said, "So I am told that you want to be a pupil of the way. Why would this be, that an Englishman, and not even a Muslim, would want to follow the way?" My cousin has been trying to explain, but it makes no sense to me at all. My own sheikh always says that is a little chance for people like you, since you will never give anything up. It is all too comfortable for you in the West, is it not so? The last thing I wanted to do was to go into the journey, and my reason for it all over again. But the more I insisted that I was going to leave and go back to England, the more she insisted that I should explain. I had not even had the opportunity to tell Hamid of my decision. He sat across the table from me, listening impassively to my rationalizations. Finally, he broke into the conversation and spoke rapidly to her in Turkish. Then, turning to me, he said, "You could go if you want, but I was going to arrange for you to see a very important man tomorrow. That is, if you wish. You have free choice, but it could be to your advantage." But I thought there was no more point in going on. I thought that because they, whoever they are, came and went while I was out, I had failed whatever the test was. "Now, you're using your own will again," Hamid said irritably. "I tell you, you're not the judge. How do you know that you have failed the test when you do not even know what the test was? If you knew patience, you would understand. Can't you see that nothing can happen until the time is right? Now it is the right time to visit someone I've been wanting you to meet. You do not know whether you passed the test, and what is more, you will not know until you find out whether this person will receive you or not. If you're received, then it is all right. If not, then not. But you have free choice. Go back to England if you like. I personally do not care one way or the other." With that, he left the table and the room. Damn it! What was all this about? I'd had enough of it, and now I was being offered more. In my frustration, I went out of the room to try to find Hamid. He was sitting in the front room, talking to his cousin. "All right," I said, "I will cancel my plane flight, but I do not understand." "Good," he said, "then you can stay here for the night." "You mean the girl has gone and there's room?" "No, she's still here, but I thought you said there wasn't room for me." "Did I?" he replied, smiling. The next day, Hamid, his cousin, and I took a car to visit the man that Hamid had mentioned. All I had been told of this man was that he was old and that he had no teeth. He was, however, very partial to soft-scented chocolates. So we stopped on the way to buy a box of very special chocolates that were made at the back of a small shop. The only instructions I had been given were that I was to wear my best clothes and that I was going to see someone who was very important in this journey. "You must be aware of everything that goes on," Hamid said, "even if you do not understand what is being said. Just pay heed and show proper respect. That is the important thing for today." We drove in silence to the other side of Istanbul, to a residential part of the city, stopping outside a house set back from the road a little way. When Hamid knocked, the door was immediately opened by a woman, who beckoned us into a large room, newly furnished and very modern in appearance. At one end of the room was a sofa with a low table in front of it. The woman put the chocolates on the table and motioned us to be seated. The chair I was given was exactly opposite the center of the sofa. Soon several members of the family and some other guests entered. After the introduction, silence fell. Soon the door opened and an old man came in. He was tall and thin, and his spare hair was almost white. His sparse hair was almost white. He was very frail, but the first thing you noticed were his eyes. They were dark and deep-set, and his gaze was compelling and direct. Stopping for a moment at the threshold, he looked round the room, greeting each person silently with those extraordinary eyes, holding each of us for a moment, and then moving on to the next person. His wife took his arm and helped him across the room to the sofa, where he sat down opposite me. He said nothing, but leaned back and breathed deeply for a few moments. His wife, who sat on a chair to his right, bent forward, opened a box of chocolates and handed them to him. He smiled, obviously pleased, but insisted that each of us take one before he could help himself. I was fascinated by the way he chewed on the chocolate with his gums, for it was true that he had no teeth. After what seemed a very long time, he turned to Hamid and asked him a question. A two-way conversation followed, with frequent references to names that I had heard before, and particularly to Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi and to Konya. Finally, the old man leant back on the sofa and closed his eyes. He seemed to be resting. The silence was complete, and everyone in the room had closed his eyes. I did the same, trying to be open to whatever was going on. After a few minutes, I felt someone nudging me. It was the wife of the old man. Smiling at me, she pointed to the sofa. He was getting slowly to his feet, supported on either side by a member of his family. When he had got his balance, he began reciting something in Turkish. His eyes closed, his right hand reaching out in front of him. I felt a tremendous surge of emotion spreading through me. It was like receiving a blessing. Then he opened his eyes and leant forward. Holding his hands above my head, he blew. "Who?" he breathed. Then, taking both my hands, he looked at me deeply, and as he did so, he spoke again in Turkish. 2 minutes later, he had gone, helped out of the room by his wife, turning back once more to raise his hand to us all and to blow into the room. Hamid leaned over to me. "It's all right," he said. "He has accepted you. He has said that you are to go to Konya immediately." "But I've already been to Konya." "And you are to go back," he said. "You are to go to the tomb of Mevlana, having first prepared yourself by paying your respects to Shamsi Tabriz. You are to sit there for 3 days and 3 nights to see if you will be received this time." What else did he say to me?" I asked. "I felt a blessing." "Ah," Hamid replied, "it was a prayer for you, but I am afraid that I cannot tell you what it was. By the way, the person who came to see you while you were in the pension was a vegetable seller from the market. She came to our door and said, 'I heard you have a friend staying with you who is very fond of vegetables. I have brought some for him.' So you see, if you had not gone out to the Bosphorus, you would have learned something. Remember, there is only one absolute being, and he manifests himself in different forms." I did not know the vegetable seller, but her arrival brought a message which told me something, and that is why I brought you here today. With that, we left. After bidding goodbye to the family, I did not ask who the old man was. It seemed superfluous, for I knew that something profound had happened, and there was really nothing to say. We drove back to the house in silence, and later that day I boarded the bus to Konya once again. So this was chapter 9. The next one is chapter 10.